Alright everyone, welcome to 知財翻訳 の Takasan. That's me. Just going to go through a easy claim today. It's an easy claim, there's nothing too hard about it, but one of the things I wanted to talk today about is just about how to write function restriction. When you write claims, what a claim is, it's basically a restriction. You're restricting this big thing down to this thing that is now patentable. You can't just patent anything. That's too big. You have to add these restrictions to bring it down to a size where it's actually, a thing that's patentable. And so everything you add into a claim is a restriction. And we restrict things by either the structure or by the function. And I'll get to it later, but often in Japanese you'll have this kano, this kind of writing. And today we'll just look at some of the ways to deal with this, whether it's a function, whether it's something that isn't a function. But just in looking at this in particular, we'll start to think about when we need to realize, right, this is an element, this is the function of the element. Because we really need to make that clear. Because, as I said, when we do claims, we add restrictions, and restrictions are either of the structure, or the relationship between other elements, or the function. So, as I said, it's just an easy claim, but just a few little things that I'm sure you'll be able to pick up and be able to use in your work at home. So we'll get started. Again, just a disclaimer, this claim already has an English translation out there. It's just out there. So just by doing this, there's nothing, not breaking any rules, not opening this up to the public. Alright, so we look at claim 1. We immediately have to go to the bottom to see what it is. Sorry for the scrolling. Alright, so it's a wiring structure, we're going to call that. A wiring structure. It's also, no, it's not here. So it's a wiring structure. And we can see that the elements of it are 1, 2, 3, 4. So immediately we can see the structure that the claim is going to take. So there's no preamble, there's nothing else apart from this, so we'll just go straight into the first element. Now you see here this element, it's actually 2 elements. The first signal wire, the second signal wire, and here we come to what I was talking about in the introduction. We have these signal wires, and what do they transmit? They transmit this electronic signal. But it's using this kano, this kind of expression. So, as I said, you could translate this as being able to, or capable of. But what this restriction is it's restricting the function of the signal wire. And when we think about function, we immediately think of configured to. Well, I do anyway. So these signal wires are configured to transmit an electronic signal. So in my mind, configured to and capable of or being able to are equal. They're comparable. And configured to is just the more accepted way of writing a function in a claim. So it's funny, sometimes you'll see configured to be able to, and things can get a bit wild. But I think it's safe to say that configured to and capable of, they're the same. They have the same meaning, the same scope in a claim. And that being the case, configured to is my go-to. So do we need each here? I don't think we need each. I think it's obvious that this is describing both of these things. Alright, good. We can go to the next element. It is a first magnetic member. And the restrictions we're going to add to this member, there's two of them. It includes something and it's made of something. So let's just do it in the same order here. Magnet member comprising, including. I've seen some people use comprising only in the transition and use including down here. I'm just going to use comprising for everything. Now it comprises. Okay, so this wire is inserted in this hollow portion. We'll see if we can bring up the. Can we bring up the claim quick? Maybe just shoot over to the website and see if we can find it here. Is this the one? Yeah, this is the one. Alright, so we are looking for hollow portion. Just want to see what exactly we're talking about, because a hollow portion can mean many things. Just want to make sure we know what we're talking about, what kind of shape it is. It may just be space. See if we can get the number. Right, so here it is. It's 54. Oh, it tells us here it's a slit. So can we find 54 in the pictures here? Looking over. Ah, here we go. So this must be our magnetic member. And the hollow portion is just a slit going all the way through there. Ah, good. So now we know that our hollow portion is just this slit, this cut in the member. Hollow portion. And in which the first signal wire is inserted. Now some people may like to get fancy here, be configured to be inserted. You don't need to go crazy with configured to. Usually you can omit it on the second time, I want to say. If you've got the element, and then if you've got the element when it's first introduced, then it's, if you're adding a function restriction and configured to this side, you don't need to go crazy further down. So there we go, nice and simple. The signal wire, the first signal wire, is inserted in the hollow portion. Now we got the second part here, and let's just restate the subject. We got number comprising. We could just go and made of. See, this is interesting because this is often translated as comprising, karonaru. And that's what it does mean. It means something is a part of something. Here specifically, it's not this comprising, it's what this member is made of. So we can use comprising here, but we can also just simply write made of. Because we got comprising here, I do want to use different. I don't want to use comprising in the same meaning here. The first, we can just go ahead. We don't need to re-establish it. Being made of a magnetic material. So here we've got again kanon. What does it do? It reduces the noise coming from noise that comes along this wire. Now, kano up here was used specifically to introduce a function. Here it's not. Here it's describing a material that this member is made of. So this use of kano is not introducing a function. It's describing the properties of a material in this situation. So we're not going to use configured to. To use configured to here would be a mistake. So what do we do? What do we do? Material. What I would love to do would be to make it into an adjective, a noise reducing material. But if we do that, then we can see how this noise actually has a description all the way back here. So it becomes hard to add this information. It would be really stupid. It'd be like we could make this adjective like hyphen, a really long adjective. We don't want to do that. So we might have to put it at the end and just say capable of. A material that is capable of, that can reduce, capable of reducing noise, stawaru. So noise, what is noise? So when you think of noise, think of it's a wave. It's a wave, and how do waves move? They travel. So we just want to use the correct word for stawaru here. Noise is a wave, waves travel. So just by understanding what noise is, like at a higher level, it leads us to find the right verb to use here. And that's what you need to do when you're translating. Always try to understand the deeper meaning of each element that appears. Noise is a wave, waves travel, that travels kaishite. I'm just going to say along. The noise comes along the wire, the first signal wire. Alright, too easy. So there we go, we're up to our third one here. This is just the same as this one, so we might skip that one. And jump down to this one here. Alrighty. So our last element is dun 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 shudan. See, when you see the Japanese shudan, you immediately think of the means plus function. In the past, shudan was just translated as means. And, means for something has a very specific meaning now in patent law. It means that we shouldn't use means when translating. The specific rule, the specifics of the meaning of means for something. So means is just a placeholder. And when there's a placeholder plus functional language, that's when you hit the means plus function, the trouble. Means, it doesn't have to be means, it can be any noun that is just a placeholder that doesn't have meaning so much, meaning in itself. So a placeholder noun like means plus a functional claim. If you write it like that, you'll run into the means plus function. And what that means is that anything in this, you have to add the physical things that means will take into the specification. See, when I say that means is a placeholder, it means that it doesn't have any structural restrictions. This placeholder noun doesn't give us any information, doesn't give us any restrictions as to what the structure may take. And when you're writing a claim, then you have to have a restriction of the structure for each element. So the way that means plus functions is dealt with is that by having this placeholder noun that doesn't give you information about the structure, you have to then, in the specification, write all the structures that this means may take. So that's how it's interpreted now. If you have a means plus function clause in the claims, the specification, you have to have all the structural configurations that you want it to cover. That's the scope. That's the scope. That's how it's interpreted. So if you don't have anything in the specification about the structure, you're using means plus function in the claims, big problem. That's a bit of history there for you. Let me know if I got that right. So, at the end of the day, we're going to use another placeholder. It's just going to be a holding unit. But, that's the workaround we have available to us. A holding unit, and it is configured to, now again, functional language, and a placeholder noun. So in reality, it's not actually very different from saying a holding for, but it's just the convention we have that this is the better way to do it. So yeah, patent law, weird, right? So what is this holding unit configured to do? It's configured to hold, surprise, surprise. So it's holding two things. It's holding the first magnetic member and the second magnetic member. And it's doing this with the wires inserted into, what doesn't say, but we know from up above that these wires are inserted into these members. Now, this and this are inserted into this and this. And we know from up here the relationship is 1 to 1 and 2 in 2. And the Japanese doesn't explicitly say this. This is an interesting problem. Well, it's not so much a problem because we know from the knowledge up here how to translate this into a good claim. The issue is the Japanese doesn't make it clear, this relationship. And this brings up the issue of mirror translation. Now, mirror translation is a term that gets thrown around a lot. It's basically means that the source language, in this case the Japanese, you have to, when you do a mirror translation, you try to produce a translation where each element is reproduced in a similar form. So any kind of moving around of the structure, any kind of adding clarity, adding new words, or adding extra words, or where there was only one element mentioned, when this element was only mentioned once, mentioning it twice, any kind of arrangement like that is not a mirror translation. But mirror translation is not our job. When translating, we have to reproduce the scope of the source. And when we do this, what we do is we produce a faithful translation. So faithful translation and mirror translation are two different things. Mirror translation is when each element in the structure is mirrored, the same form as used. Faithful translation is when the scope is the same. Now, the problem here is that there are many companies, many clients, they are scared of faithful translations. And often it's because they don't have the skill to translate into a faithful translation in a matter of, teasing out the elements and producing a good English claim that keeps the same scope. Because languages, they're not a one-for-one relationship. You can't do a mirror translation and always keep the same scope. A mirror translation has its limitations like that. Because language is language, Japanese and English, you can't just mirror them and always get the same meaning. So there's the problem. You have clients and companies that like mirror translations because it's easier to understand. But then you have good translators that will use faithful translations to help produce a claim that has the same scope. So just an interesting dynamic there to keep in mind. And it's actually something that we face every day as translators, the boundaries between faithful and mirror translation and the expectations of our clients. So if we were to do a faithful translation, I would, with the first signal, I'm going to be doing that a lot, signal wire inserted in the first magnetic member and the second signal wire inserted in the second magnetic member. Suppose to do a faithful translation, I'll do that. Which, as you can see, it's adding little bits in. And to produce a faithful translation, to produce a good claim, I think you need to do that here. A mirror translation would produce a bad claim. So again, something to think about. All right. So I don't want to keep this too long. If there's any questions about that, feel free to ask. Might just skip down to claim 2 here. It's always nice to see dependent claim. Alright, so let's go down to claim 2. So there might be some elements popping up that we didn't look up here. Alright, so our claim 2 is... Okay, hang on, did I miss? I did miss this, didn't I? Right, so it's a wired structure of 4. Which one? For an electronic device, apparatus. There's so many there's so many little things that could be different. This could be 4. This could be apparatus. Let's just stick with that. Okay. Alright, let's go down to claim 2. So, dependent claim, the wiring structure of an electronic device. We're in. Alright, so here we have our kano. As we're talking about up above. Will this be a functional restriction? Let's have a look. So we're talking about, right, so I guess up here the holding unit includes a first and a second holding portion. Alright, so this is, we're in the first holding portion. Right, it includes a shape, it has a shape. Which is better here? Say include a shape, so it has a shape. Say shaped. There's many ways you can do this. Shaped with an opening toward a little bit different from the source. I don't think it's wrong, but let's get close to the source and say has a shape that opens toward a first direction. So it has a shape, and in English it doesn't make a lot of sense that a shape opens towards the first direction. It's a 3-dimensional shape. Is, I want to say shape is 2-dimensional, but no, we can't get that specific. So it has a shape that opens towards the first direction and towards the first direction. Let's just quickly look at the picture to see what they are talking about. Because it's weird just thinking that a shape opens in a direction. We might need a little bit of help to see what this is actually talking about. Okay, so it's 401. Where's our shape opening in it? 401. Okay, so it looks like it's this middle part here that is kind of like I guess kind of clamps. It's kind of where something is inserted. So it's got an open space on this side and it's closed on this side. So something is inserted in, so it kind of rests against the back. Okay. Alright, that's not too bad. It's a shape that opens towards the first direction. Some people might put comprise here. I think comprise is wrong here because shape is not an element. Again, when we're translating, we need to think in terms of elements. Is shape an element? Is it a further restriction on the holding portion that it includes this element? No. We're just saying that this holding portion, we're restricting its structure. We're saying it has this shape. So we don't want to introduce shape as an element. so we don't use comparison. Now, the second restriction to this holding portion is that this first magnetic member is attached to it, can be attached to it. Alright. Now, some people might write so that they might try to connect this shape to this function and try to, I don't want to say they try to do it, but they will use this kind of language so that it can create a causal relationship. They will say that it has this shape so that it can do this. In reality, that is probably correct, but in a claim we do not want to say that. We do not want to introduce a causal relationship, especially if it's not written in the claim, in the source here. In the source we just have it's a shape and it has a function. So we do not want to write anything that will introduce this kind of cause and effect, this kind of causality. So that we don't want that, we can just say and. It's just another restriction. Doesn't need to have any relationship to this first. And the restriction is, and the holding portion is, so this is what we're talking about when we saw the shape before. It's inserted, it's kind of attached to this holding portion. But the problem we have here is that it is really hard to have the holding portion as the subject and to use this. Just try to write it out for you. As a shape and is attachable. See, it's not attachable. This is attachable. It and is configured to be attached to by. See, this is getting tricky. Because of this verb here, it seems like this has to be the subject. The first, look how much easier it is when we put this as the subject. The first magnetic member being configured to be attached to the first holding portion from the first direction. So this is what it is saying. But in the Japanese, we have this as the subject and this as the object. But this verb can only be used with this as the subject. Oh. So this isn't, I don't want to say this is wrong, but look at this claim, look at the source. We're adding a restriction, we're adding a restriction. But the English is adding a restriction, but then this second thing, it's not a restriction to the holding portion, it's adding a restriction to this first magnetic member. So in this case, this isn't a faithful what might be a faithful translation. It's not a mirror translation. I would say it's not a faithful translation either, because this is specifically two restrictions of this member. So we could be bold and we could say and is configured to receive. So we could change this verb. What do you think about that? This is definitely not a mirror translation, but is it a faithful translation? And that's the conversation we need to have. Because if I put this as the subject and then add a restriction to what this is, it's different from this source. But then if I keep this as the subject and add a restriction that it is configured to receive, I change this verb to something that is suitable, to this, it becomes not a mirror translation and something that would be quite scary. I mean, honestly. Interesting to have this conversation. Let us know what you think. Would you be brave enough to put this here? Can receive be used to make this into a faithful translation? To receive the first magnetic member from the first direction. I'll put the other one up too. So let's put a comma here so that we know the first magnetic member being configured to attach to the first holding portion from the first direction. So let us know what you think. How would you translate this? Would you make it into a faithful translation? Would you make it into a mirror translation? Oh, so that's something that gets me. This isn't even a mirror translation. Because this restriction should apply to this, but this is just this is adding a restriction to this. Oh, so in that case I would probably go here. But then this is a bold move, yeah. Alright, that's actually probably a good place to stop. If you have any questions, any comments, any opinions, please let me know. It'd be great to have this conversation with you guys out there. Let us know what you think. Alright, so short and sweet. Haishin kokomare desu. So every week on Tuesdays we're doing this. On Fridays, Saturdays, we'll probably doing game streams. So if you're interested in that, follow those streams as well. Alright, good night everyone.